strawberry lemon cheesecake bars. And guess what? It's no bake. It's cold, refreshing. 1 box of vanilla wafers in a bag. And I'm crushing the vanilla wafers because it's going to be the buttery crust for the strawberry lemon bars. All right. I'm melting 1.5 sticks of butter. It's a lot of butter, but hey, you're making a cheesecake bar. You can't skimp on the butter. While that's melting, I'm going to grab a lemon and some sugar. I'm zesting a half a lemon, so I want to kick that lemon flavor up a notch. You know, now that I think of it, house names like Marty's are pretty common in my family. My grandmother's brother, his name was John Robinson, but we called him Snooky. I have no idea why we called him Snooky, but I always addressed him as Uncle Snooky. House name. So I've added 3 tablespoons of sugar. I want to add that hot butter directly to those crushed vanilla wafers. I want to add a heavy pinch of salt. This crust is so versatile. You can use it in a key lime pie. If you're making some type of like baked fruit, like grilled peaches, you can add it as a quick crumble. And I actually make a baked banana pudding cheesecake. And of course, banana pudding has vanilla wafers, so use a vanilla wafer crust. All right, that looks great. That is thebomb.com. I'm just gonna press down till it's even and leveled. And I've added the parchment paper to make it easy to pull out once it's done. Alrighty, so my crust is in the freezer. I'm gonna get started on my cheesecake filling. I'm using, which is important, room temp cream cheese. I've tried to take the shortcut and not get this cream cheese at room temp, and it does not work. You won't get that nice and fluffy cream cheese filling if you use cold, mildly cold cream cheese. All right, so I'm using about 24 ounces. Here's why I love this no-bake recipe. It's summertime, it's hot. Who wants to turn on their oven in the summertime? I mean, here in Charleston, it's 100 degrees, past 100 degrees. It's hot. I'm not turning that oven on. I'm gonna beat my softened cream cheese till it gets fluffy with a little volume. So I'm gonna stop the process right now. A little bit of lemon zest. 2 teaspoons vanilla extract. All right, get this going again. That looks good to me. It's nice and fluffy, nice and silky and smooth. It's doubled in size, got a little bit of volume in there. Ready to add my lemon juice. 2 teaspoons, 2 cups, confectioner's sugar, added in 1 cup at a time. So I've made this recipe before for my mom and she loved it. The boys haven't tried it yet and I'm pretty sure they're gonna love it too. All right, I'm gonna add in the other cup, the final cup, confectioner's sugar. Get this started again. This is gonna be so light, so airy. Pop it in the fridge, take it out. Once it's chilled, it's gonna be cool, delicious, and refreshing. I'm gonna add in 1.5 cups of sour cream. It gives it that sharp tanginess and it just complements that lemon juice and lemon zest. Alrighty, pop this off. Fold in my whipped cream. And that's about 1 cup. Now because it's no bake, you want that nice, airy, melt in your mouth effect. And that whipped cream does that. In the time that it took me to make this, my crust has already set up. It's fluffy, it's creamy, and it's gonna taste so good once it's chilled. That is done. I'm gonna pop this in the fridge. I gotta cut up some strawberries for the garnish. Cut the top off, cut it lengthwise. Nothing special. And I love using strawberries, especially in the summertime. It just screams summer. They're nice and sweet and ripe, very easy. I mean, lemon and strawberry go hand in hand, like strawberry lemonade. Just place them down. You can get fancy and create a little pattern. If you don't want to do a pattern, that's okay too. I'm putting on the strawberries now instead of when I refrigerated it because strawberries tend to get really, really watery once it sets. These will not get watery at all. I've zested a lemon, I'm gonna add that right on top. I'm gonna make sure I cut between the strawberries. I will eat this by myself, but I have to share. Y'all ready for dessert?
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that is good.
That looks excellent.
There you go. Look at that.
Oh, that's good.
Oh, man.
A Carolina mud pie. It's a no-bake pudding-based pie. It has a chocolatey crust at the bottom, a little layer of chocolate at the bottom, some pecans. You got a pudding that goes on top and whipped cream on top of that. Muddy, chocolatey, amazing. So I have 22 chocolate sandwich cookies here, putting into my food processor to make the crust. Why 22? Because you need the butter to chocolate cookie sandwich ratio perfect. Because if it's too much chocolate sandwich cookies and not enough butter, it's not gonna come together and you're just gonna have a crust that's gonna break apart, okay? Get this thing going. Right, forgot my salt. A 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. Let me grab my melted butter. I have 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter. You'll start to see the crust come together. Ooh, it smells so good. Chocolate and butter and salt. I have a 9-inch pie dish. And you see why it's called a mud pie? The crust looks like fertile soil. Right, I'm gonna use the back of my measuring cup here to smooth it on out. I'm gonna let this set up in the freezer for about 30 minutes. While this is in the freezer, I'm gonna get started on that chocolate layer. So I'm gonna heat this to medium high. I'm just making a simple chocolate sauce. I have 4 ounces of semi-sweet chocolate chips. I have a 1/4 cup of sweetened condensed milk. It's gonna be a sweet chocolatey sauce. A tablespoon of vegetable oil. This is gonna help keep it nice and loose. All I'm making is like a chocolate shell. And you can buy this in the store pre-made, but I'm telling you, once you make it at home, you'll never buy that stuff in the store again. All right, this is done. Let me turn my heat off and grab that pie crust out of the freezer. All right, my pie crust is set up quite nicely. I'm gonna take a spoon and get some of this chocolate out. I'm just gonna spread it over the bottom. This is a rich, decadent pie. I am a chocolate lover. I actually prefer chocolate over like candies. Give me chocolate any day. It's like every time I eat something that's a little salty or something, like eat dinner, I have to have chocolate to follow it up. And as soon as it hits that cold pie crust, it's started to set up and it's already hardened. Look at that. I have a 1/4 cup of chopped pecans. This pie has some serious layers. So that buttery crust and then that layer of hardened chocolate and those pecans is gonna give you tremendous crunch. I mean, this is gonna be crunchy and smooth with that pudding on top. All right, I'm gonna set this to the side and get started on my pudding. I'm making a simple pudding mixture, and don't judge me. Yes, I am using box pudding. I mean, sometimes, hey, box pudding works and there's nothing wrong with it. I have 1 large box of instant chocolate pudding. I'm gonna whisk in 1 3/4 cup of cold milk. That's how that pudding is gonna set up. Super simple. If you wanna make your pudding from scratch, you can. I'm gonna make it from the box and it's gonna taste just as good. My pudding is starting to set up. That cold milk does the trick. Now I'm gonna fold in a 1/2 cup of whipped topping. Smooth it out with my spatula. I'm so excited about this. I mean, guys, I'm telling you, I am a chocolate lover. All right, I'm taking some of that whipped topping I have left over. I'm just gonna put a little something in the middle of that. Giving it just a little zhuzh in the middle there. Red velvet cupcakes. I'm gonna start with my dry ingredients, 1½ cups of all-purpose flour. I'm sifting this into the bowl because I wanna make sure there are no clumps in the mixture. My grandma had a little sifter that would kind of remind me of the Jack in the Box, and you just stand there and I don't know if it made that sound, but in my mind, it made that sound. Now to this bowl, a teaspoon of baking soda, leavening agent, and 1 teaspoon of salt. Red velvet is actually a chocolate-based cake. So 1 tablespoon of cocoa powder. Make sure that everything is incorporated. That looks great. Get started on my wet ingredients. To my mixer, I'm gonna add 1.5 cups of granulated sugar, equal parts oil, so 1.5 cups of canola, 2 tablespoons, red food coloring, because we really want that red to shine. I'm gonna use a teaspoon of vanilla extract, basically a capful. I love the flavor of vanilla, but it also intensifies the other ingredients in the cake. 2 teaspoons of distilled white vinegar. And if you have ever had Southern red velvet cake, it has a little tang to it. That's either because we have used distilled vinegar or buttermilk. And of course, it also helps soften up the cake. Last but not least, I'm gonna add the eggs to the mixing bowl. Look at this color. I mean, it's already very vibrant. You want red velvet cake? I'm gonna give you red velvet cake. All right, that looks good. Dry ingredients, haven't forgot about them. I'm gonna alternate between the dry ingredient and some buttermilk to make sure that everything is just really incorporated. So turn the speed on low, a little bit of dry, a little bit of buttermilk. As the red mixture with the eggs and the sugar is now mixing in with the chocolate, it's becoming this deep, rich red color. And that is the last bit of buttermilk. And just until the last bit of that buttermilk is incorporated, don't want to overmix. Get my cupcake pans. This mixture makes about 24 cupcakes. And I'm filling each about halfway, because of course, once it bakes, it's gonna rise. This is a really gorgeous red. Make sure there are no air bubbles. I have my oven set to 350. I'm gonna bake these for about 15 to 20 minutes. And in the meantime, I can prepare the football-inspired frosting. For this chocolate-based cream cheese frosting, I'm using 2 sticks of unsalted room temp butter, 2 8-ounce blocks of room temp cream cheese. I love a cream cheese frosting. It's a little tangy, it's a little sweet, and it's not too much. Mix this up a little bit to make sure that that's really nice and incorporated before I add in my other ingredients. That looks really good to me. I don't see any clumps of cream cheese. I don't see any clumps of butter. Yep, that's exactly what you know what? See? That's why you gotta take your spatula and kind of wipe it across, because there's a line of butter here. Not done yet. You need to mix it a little more. Gotta make this thing sweet. Add in 5 cups of powdered sugar. The consistency I'm looking for is fairly thick because it's going on a cupcake and I want to kind of shape it. Speed it up. 1 more cup. And I also want this to be a little thicker because I'm adding melted chocolate. See how it sits on that attachment? This is exactly the consistency I was looking for. Now, before I add any color to this, I'm gonna put a little to the side because this will be the frosting I'll use for the football stitching. A little more. And that should be enough. 1/4 cup of cocoa powder. And because I want a deeper chocolate color and I want it to resemble a football, I'm gonna add a couple tablespoons of melted dark chocolate. Mix that right in there. About a teaspoon of vanilla. A football to me is a reddish brown color. So drop of red food coloring. There you go. Football inspired frosting. And it's super thick. They're so pretty. beautiful red velvet cupcakes. I'm gonna let them cool, and I can't wait till the guys see how cute they're gonna be. Oh my goodness, little cupcakes. I'm gonna take some of that chocolate cream cheese frosting, make it smooth. Take my white cream cheese, go down the center, and then 3 lines across. And got yourself a red velvet football cupcake. Touchdown! These are done. Gotta get them out to my family. Got cupcakes.
Ooh, that looks nice.
And it's red velvet with chocolate cream cheese frosting. Not your grandma's bread pudding. I'm starting off with 6 eggs, this entire quart of heavy cream, 2 cups of white sugar, 2 cups of brown sugar, 1 tablespoon of cinnamon, teaspoon of ginger, gives it a nice little kick, 1.5 cups of raisins. Give this a whisk. All right, I'm gonna put this to the side and cut my French loaf. I've used different types of bread, so whatever bread you got in your house, you can make bread pudding with. Just make slices like this, and then just cut them up into 4 equal chunks, just like that. One last ingredient, 2 sticks of melted butter. What is bread pudding without butter? And I make sure that it was nice and cool because, of course, you don't want to add hot butter to eggs. Mix it up. It's got a whiff of that cinnamon and that sugar. I want to make sure that every piece of bread gets some love. All right, spray my baking dish with a little canola. I'll pour this directly into the baking dish. Oh, that looks great. I'm gonna put it in the fridge for about an hour. This looks amazing. So before I put it in the oven, I'm gonna just sprinkle a little bit more white sugar on top, and that's gonna help it get nice and caramelized. So I have my oven preheated to 350. It's gonna bake for about 45 to 50 minutes. My bourbon sauce for that bread pudding. So I've got 3 tablespoons of butter melted. I'm gonna add in about 2 cups of confectioner's sugar in here. Get that nice and whisk. I'm gonna add in a little bit of milk, just a little bit to make it nice and smooth. A pinch of cinnamon, just to incorporate some of the flavors I used in the bread pudding. All right, and last but not least, bourbon. You really want that bourbon flavor to be the star of this sauce. My bourbon sauce is together. I'm not gonna pour it on the bread pudding right now. I'm gonna wait till I plate. Pour that bourbon sauce on top, add a little whipped cream on the top, send my guest home with a bang. I'm making my spin on my carrot cake. So instead of doing the big cake, I'm gonna do small little bite-sized cakes. I just shredded up about 3 cups of carrots. Dry ingredients, I'm using 2.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 1.5 teaspoons of baking soda, 1 teaspoon of baking powder, 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1/2 teaspoon of ginger, and 1/4 teaspoon of allspice. Now for the wet ingredients. I have 1 cup of light brown sugar, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, 1 cup of crushed pineapples. That's gonna make that carrot cake extra moist. 1 cup of vegetable oil, 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, 3 eggs. Give it a whisk. And my carrot cake is not as dark as most carrot cakes, and that's because of the pineapples that I use. It's almost a light brown color. I'm adding just about 3 cups of grated carrots. Now I'm not using all of my carrots because I want to top the little pieces with more carrot. A cup of walnuts, a cup of golden raisins. Right, that's ready. Now I'm gonna take my dry ingredients and fold it into my wet ingredients, a little at a time. That's just to make sure that it's fully incorporated. I have 2 quarter baking sheets that I've lined with parchment paper and sprayed with non-stick cooking spray. Knocking any of these air bubbles out to make sure it bakes nice and even. I have my oven preheated to 350. I'm gonna bake these for about 20 to 25 minutes. So I'm making traditional cream cheese icing. I have a cup of softened butter, 12 ounces of room temp cream cheese, and I'm just gonna beat this for about 2 to 3 minutes. I want it to get nice and fluffy. I'm gonna add in my sifted powdered sugar now, a cup at a time. Normally it'll take about 4 cups, but just depends on your kitchen. It could be hotter in there, it could be hotter outside. You just gotta eyeball it. This is pipeable icing. My carrot cake is cooled. I'm gonna take this really big cutting board I have that I've been waiting to use. I'm just gonna flip over my cake. Ha-ha! Yes, came right off. Take this parchment paper off. So I plan on cutting off the ends just to make sure I have a really nice and neat rectangle. Oh, that cake is so moist. I am not throwing out those ends. It can be a little snack for tomorrow. I have a plastic bag here that I filled with my cream cheese frosting. I added a large star tip, pipe it onto my bottom layer. Cut these into quarters, that's it. Since I'm gonna cut them in squares anyway, just to make things a little easier, make sure it doesn't fall apart. Pipe some more icing on top. A whole walnut on top. A golden raisin. Sprinkle a little bit more of the grated carrot on top. Adds a little pop of color. That's it. Older Southern women love a good old pound cake. So I am making them a citrus pound cake with a blood orange curd. So I've zested 1 orange and I've juiced 3 oranges. And now I'm preparing my dry ingredients. I'm using 3 cups of all-purpose flour. I'm using a half a teaspoon of salt and a half a teaspoon of baking soda. Give it a mix. Set that to the side. All right, now for my wet. I have 1.5 cups of softened, unsalted butter with 3 cups of granulated sugar. So I'm just gonna cream this together until it becomes light and fluffy. Now I have 5 eggs. I'm gonna beat them in 1 egg at a time. All right, so I've added my last egg. Now I'm gonna add my orange zest. Beat that in. So citrusy. If you love citrus, you're gonna love this recipe. All right, and I have a half a cup of sour cream, also room temp. The sour cream helps the cake stay moist longer. So I'm gonna alternate between my orange juice, freshly squeezed orange juice, and that dry mixture, starting off with the dry. All right, slowly add in my orange juice. Oh, this smells so good. A little bit more of the wet, and I'm gonna end with my dry. All right, that looks good to me. Let me grab my bundt pan that I've buttered and floured. I'm just gonna spread my batter evenly across the bottom of this pan. This is gonna be a very citrusy pound cake. So the oven is preheated to 325. I'm gonna bake that for 1 hour and 15. And now it's time to get started on my blood orange curd. I'm gonna get my pot started. I have a 1/2 cup of sugar, a little blood orange zest, and I'm gonna mash this down to help release some of the oils from the zest. Blood orange is a little more tart than your typical like navel orange. I have 5 egg yolks, and this is gonna be the start of my curd. Give it a mix, get that sugar to start to melt. Now I'm going to add 2/3 a cup of blood orange juice. Look at that color. And the juice of this lemon. And I'm gonna add a pinch of salt. I'm just gonna cook this on medium-low temp. My curd has started to thicken. So I'm gonna turn the heat off and add a little butter. It's gonna give it a nice, smooth, and velvety taste. I'm gonna add a little bit in at a time. Mix it in, make sure it melts. Okay, add a little bit more in. I wanna strain this and then cover it and let it sit in the fridge and cool down a bit. And I'm straining this because I want just the curd and not the zest. Now, if you really love zest, you can leave it in there, but you want something that's really smooth, so it's best to strain the zest. If you put a curd or like a pudding in the fridge without it being covered, and you have to cover the surface, so you have to put the plastic right on top because you don't want a skin to develop in the fridge. Okay. My pound cake has been cooling for about 15 minutes. I'm gonna invert it into my cooling rack and let it cool down some more. This is always where I get like the most anxiety. Fingers crossed. 1, 2. Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. So you got that oven occupied. The slow cooker is a fabulous way to make your desserts. I am going to make a slow cooker cobbler, and I'm using black cherries. I love using cherries in cobblers because they're so meaty and juicy. So I have some black cherries that I've thawed. I've reserved the juice from the cherries because I want to make a nice syrupy sauce with that. And that's a 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, a 1/4 cup of cornstarch, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/4 teaspoon of nutmeg. I'm gonna give it a whisk, then add 3/4 cup of the reserved cherry juice. I decided to make a cobbler because what's more southern than a cobbler? And I thought it would be better to use the slow cooker so I can focus on everything else that I need to make. So you got that oven occupied. The slow cooker is a fabulous way to make your desserts. And as this gets nice and hot, it's gonna turn into this beautiful cherry syrup. And I'll pour this back into the slow cooker with those thawed cherries. Mix that around. All right, gotta make my topping. And I decided to kind of lighten it up a bit. I'm using some reduced fat milk and a little less sugar than I normally use, but still great nonetheless. So for my dry ingredients, I'm using 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 1/2 teaspoons of baking powder. It's gonna be fluffy and airy. 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, a 1/2 teaspoon of cinnamon, and a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Give it a whisk. All right, so I've mixed my dry. Now for my wet, 1 egg. And now I'm adding 2/3 cup of reduced fat milk. I have some melted butter. That's about 3 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter and a little vanilla extract. Give it a whisk. Break up that egg yolk. And now I'm going to add my wet to my dry to make my batter. Alrighty, so I'm gonna add my batter to the top of this. Okay, so I'm gonna cover this and cook it for about 2.5 to 3 hours on low. And when it comes out and it's nice and warm, I am gonna serve this with a scoop of ice cream. Red velvet cake is my absolute favorite cake. So I'm gonna get started on my dry mixture. I have 2 3/4 cup cake flour. I'm gonna add in a 1/4 cup of cocoa powder, a teaspoon of baking soda, and a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Red velvet cake is essentially a chocolate cake with a little bit of red food coloring. I'm gonna put this to the side, get started on my wet, 1 stick softened, unsalted butter, 2 cups of granulated sugar, and 1 cup of vegetable oil. I'm gonna cream this. Creaming means just beating it until it becomes fluffy. I want the butter and the vegetable oil and the sugar to almost look pale, okay? I'm gonna add in 1 egg at a time, 3 eggs in total. All right, the last egg. All right, now for the liquid. I have 1 cup of room temp buttermilk. To this, I'm gonna add in 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract, 2 tablespoons of red food coloring, and last but not least, 2 teaspoons of white distilled vinegar. And the vinegar helps the cake retain its red color. All right, just making sure it's thoroughly mixed. All right, now I'm gonna add my flour and my liquid, alternating between the two. I'm starting with the flour. Add in a little bit of that liquid. Scrape down the sides. There's that color. Chocolatey, velvety red cake. The last bit of my dry. Add in the rest of my liquid. All right, that's done. All right, I have a 9x13 tray here that I have sprayed with non-stick cooking spray. Just gonna add the batter directly to the tray. Isn't it pretty? That deep red color. Then once it bakes, it's gonna get really bright red. All right, so I have my oven preheated to 350. I'm gonna bake this off for about 30 minutes or until I insert a toothpick in the center and it comes out clean. You can't make a red velvet cake without cream cheese frosting. Super simple recipe. I'm gonna cream 1 stick of unsalted butter with 1/4 teaspoon salt. 8 ounces softened cream cheese. Cream this all together until it becomes super fluffy. Now I'm gonna add a little bit of powdered sugar at a time. A little bit more. I'm gonna add in a teaspoon of vanilla extract. All right, I'm gonna put it in the fridge, let it set up. I gotta grab my cake out of the oven and let that cool on the counter. I love icing. I think I like icing more than the cake. Look how pretty that is. And for a little something to just bring it all together, crushed pecans. We like to do it big in my family on birthdays. So I gotta have 2 of my favorite people here. Of course, it's my mom, it's her birthday, and Aunt TC is gonna be joining us to help celebrate. I'm making a cake from scratch, and it's gonna be a little festive cake that kind of goes along with the Tex-Mex theme, a brown butter spice cake, dulce de leche in the middle, and then I'm gonna have this spicy chocolate ganache on top. Oh, it's gonna be beautiful, and it's gonna blow my mom's mind. So I have 2 sticks of butter here that I'm gonna put in the skillet that's extremely hot. And browning your butter gives it this deep, rich, warm flavor. You don't want the butter to stand in one spot on your pot because it will burn, it'll burn off. I love using unsalted butter when baking because of course you wanna control the amount of salt. What I'm looking for is the little bits of brown butter, and I'm looking for it to turn almost a golden brown color. I'm gonna chill this over ice. I need the brown butter to solidify before I add it to my wet ingredients. So I'm gonna get it started on my cake batter. I have 3 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour in here, 1 tablespoon of baking powder. It's gonna help the cake to rise. 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda. That's also gonna help the cake to rise. 1.5 teaspoons of kosher salt. 1 teaspoon of cinnamon. That's the spice in the spice cake. and a teaspoon of freshly grated nutmeg. If you can't find fresh nutmeg, you can always use the powdered nutmeg, but you want to use a little bit more of that because fresh nutmeg is much stronger. Let me grab that brown butter that's chilled. I'm gonna add this to my mixer with 1 cup of light brown sugar and 1 cup of granulated sugar. Let me get my brown butter out the bowl. It's solidified, of course, so it's gonna be a little hard. You see those bits of browned butter at the bottom? That's gonna really turn that cake up a notch. And I'm beating this until it becomes fluffy and almost pale in color. And I'm looking forward to seeing Aunt TC. You know, anytime my Aunt TC around, it's a party, of course. Now, I don't know if you know the story, but Aunt TC is not my mom's sister. They were best friends growing up. Aunt TC is actually my godmother. And so Aunt TC has always been an important part of my life. She is the life of any party. She's funny, she's loud, she can cook. She's just a wonderful human being. I'm gonna add my eggs in now. 3 eggs in total, 1 at a time. You wanna make sure your egg is totally mixed in before adding in another egg. And you'll start to see the consistency change a little bit with the egg. Okay, I'm gonna stop this now and add in some sour cream. Sour cream helps to get your cake a little tender. 2 teaspoons or 2 cupfuls of vanilla extract. Okay, now I'm gonna alternate between 1.5 cups of room temp milk and the dry mixture. You just don't wanna dump it all in there at once because it alters the way your cake will bake, okay? Stopping to add the dry ingredients. All right, that looks done. No bits of flour are left. I have 3 8-inch cake pans that I have put some butter and flour in. Divide the batter evenly between all 3 cake pans. See how fluffy that batter is? I'm using an offset spatula to smooth out my batter, knocking any air bubbles out of the batter. You want to even bake, that's why you do that. I have the oven preheated to 350. I'm gonna bake it for about 25 minutes until I insert a toothpick in the center and it comes out clean. My cakes have cooled and they smell incredible. Sometimes in the oven, it bakes a little uneven, which is okay. Take a serrated knife and just cut a little bit off the top. And if you want, a really fun thing to do with those pieces when you cut them off, you can make cake pops out of them. I like to use my swivel cake stand just to help with the icing. In the center, I'm gonna put some dulce de leche, which is basically sweetened condensed milk that you cook down all the way until it turns to this brown consistency. And then, because everything else is just so in your face, decided to kind of cool it down a little bit with just a American buttercream. You got butter, confectioner's sugar, milk, that's it. Flip it over so you won't have any of that crumb in the center, okay? Dulce de leche in the center. Oh, look at that. I'm also adding flaky sea salt. Essentially, it's just salted caramel. Instead of doing a traditional frosting on the cake, I'm gonna do a naked cake. So instead of putting an extra coat on top of the crumb coat, you want the cake to peek through. That's why it's called naked, semi-dressed. I'm going to take some of that dulce de leche and swirl it with the buttercream on the sides to give it a nice marbled effect. Finish off the top. I'm gonna let this chill in the fridge before I put the chocolate dripping on top. So I'm not making a typical ganache. I'm gonna kick it up a bit. Make it a little spicy, okay? Like my mom's personality. Half a cup of heavy cream in here, half a teaspoon of cinnamon, 1/4 teaspoon of chili powder, and about a capful of vanilla extract. The warm spices in this ganache are gonna complement the warm spices in the cake. I have 4 ounces bittersweet chocolate. I'm just gonna pour the hot heavy cream in there, and that's gonna make the ganache. Just stir it around until that chocolate starts to melt.
Look how quickly that melted.
I'm gonna keep whisking this until it's cool enough to put on the cake. It is there.
All right. Now let me see how you drizzle that.
I'm gonna slowly put it in the center. I'm gonna take my offset spatula right here and force some of that drip.
Oh, that's beautiful.
You know, she likes pretty and she likes her flowers. I like to freestyle. There's no rhyme or reason to this. Even go down the sides with it and just stick it in there like that.
Kardea, that cake looks good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hey! Happy birthday!
Oh, thank you. Oh, that's so pretty.
I made a brown butter spice cake for you. The center has dulce de leche in the inside with flaky sea salt and a spiced chocolate ganache on top.
That is so good.
Thank you.
This is so good.
Okay, calm down. Let me get mine.
It's not your birthday, it's my birthday.
No, but we can all goodness together. My Lord have mercy. Everybody want everything for themselves. Girl, this cake's so good, I was about to reach over and
What?
Oh, Kardea, you outdid yourself on this one. Thank you. Salute.
I'm making a big apple crumb cheesecake with this really incredible crumb on top with apples. So in this bowl here, I have 15 graham crackers that I have crushed. I've added 3 tablespoons of brown sugar. I'm adding 6 tablespoons of melted butter. So this is a classic graham cracker crust, and a 1/4 teaspoon salt to kind of enhance that brown sugar. It's buttery and it's really, really good. The thing about making a really great crust, you have to make sure that it's super buttery. Otherwise, if it's kind of dry, it'll just fall apart when you cut it, and that butter does that. This looks great. I have a 9-inch spring-form pan sprayed with non-stick spray, and that crust will pop right out of there. Just gonna use my fingers to press the crust down evenly. There's nothing like a homemade cheesecake. Once you learn how to perfect a cheesecake, I promise you it'll become second nature, and it's something that you'll always want to do. I have my oven preheated to 350. I'm gonna bake it for 6 to 10 minutes, then get started on my apple crumb topping. For the topping, I'm adding 1½ cups of all-purpose flour, a 1/2 cup of light brown sugar, a teaspoon of cinnamon, a 1/2 cup of butter, that's about 1 stick, and a 1/4 teaspoon of kosher salt. Oh, I smell that cinnamon and that butter. It's a crumb, so once it bakes, it's gonna get really, really crunchy and super buttery. I'm just mixing this diced Granny Smith apple in here, and trust me, you don't have to worry about if your pieces are equal. It's all gonna go on top of this cheesecake, and it's gonna look fabulous when it comes out the oven. I smell that crust. Let's check on it. It's nice and golden brown, and it smells incredible. Gonna let it cool right here and get started on my filling. All right, so I have room temperature cream cheese. You don't want big chunks, and the way to prevent that is to make sure that your cream cheese is softened, okay? 1 cup room temp sour cream, vanilla extract, about 2 teaspoons. I'm using 3 whole eggs and the yolk of 1 egg, so 4 eggs all together, 1 at a time. And that's just to make sure that the eggs are thoroughly incorporated in your filling. 2nd egg. And the yolk of the 4th egg. Now I'm adding in 2 tablespoons of cornstarch and 1 cup of sugar. My crust has cooled down, and it's okay to add my filling now. I'm taking my topping, and I'm just gonna put it gently on the filling. Don't worry if some of it sinks in the middle there. Once it bakes, it'll pop right back up. I have the oven preheated to 350. I'm gonna bake it for 60 minutes. Once it's done, I'm gonna turn the oven off. Let it sit in the oven with the door cracked for an additional 60 minutes. Take it out, let it sit for about an hour in the fridge, and I promise you, you're gonna have the best cheesecake you've ever tasted.